afternoon. My name is Karen Soltich and I'm the Canada Excellence Chair in Health Equity and Community Wellbeing at Toronto Metropolitan University. I really want to thank you all for joining us today, both here in the room and online. This is actually our largest international event and public lecture that we've presented today. So lots of incredible logistics. I really want to thank the CERC team and our invited guests who had to navigate public transport from quite a distance, ended up doing unusual and interesting things. So thank you for joining us for our book launch today of Indigenous Disability Studies with Dr. John Ward, Lexi Giizhigokwe Nahwegiizhic, Elder Tom Dearhouse and Diane Rudakenga. Today's event is hybrid, with some gathered here on TMU campus and others joining us online across Canada and beyond. Audio captioning is provided. For those online, please select CC button on your Zoom menu bar in order to see the captions. Before we start, I would like to offer what in Australia we call an acknowledgement of country. And that is acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of country and land throughout Australia and what is commonly referred to as Canada or Turtle Island. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present, acknowledging First Nations people's shared experience and impact of colonisation on their health and wellbeing, their families, kinship networks and communities. The CERC, or the Canada Excellence Research Chair in Health Equity and Community Wellbeing, which is delivering this program, the public lecture program, is a transformative research initiative that employs and engages community partnerships to expand our understanding, practice and delivery of health outcomes for all members of our communities. Through collaboration with a network of healthcare institutions, service providers and civil society organisations, the program aims for a paradigm shift, one that challenges a siloed, expert-driven approach to health and wellbeing and moves towards a community-engaged preventative model of wellbeing. Uniquely applying a critical disability lens, the research program aims to not only reduce health disparities that are inextricable from their socio-structural contexts, but also to embed community knowledge into healthcare institutions, systems and models of delivery. Since the beginning of the program, which only began just on 6 months ago, we've been awarded a number of grants. We've done a number of large-scale national and international events, and we have many more planned for this year, with over 200 registrants today, both online and here. We're extremely grateful for your continued support in our endeavour to go beyond access and to really think about and develop transformative health systems that co-create inclusive healthcare and wellbeing with and in partnership with our communities. Our event today will be opened by Elder Joanne Delaware, who is Toronto Metropolitan's Elder or K'Shiheo and Senior Advisor of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. Elder Joanne is joining us virtually, and we'd like to thank you, Elder Joanne, and we are honoured to have you here with us today. Over to you.
I thought I was going to be immediately ready, and of course, I couldn't find my little button to open my mic. Wache, Adishna Hassan, Sahakutan, Kashin Ishku, Mahinga Nodam, Omishkigo. It's just announced in my ancestral language, which is Omishkigo from Attawapiskat, that my spirit name is Shadow Hawk Woman, and I'm from the Wolf Clan, and I'm Omishkigo. I am really honored to be here today, and thank you so much for that very heartfelt opening and land acknowledgement, Karen. And I'm a sucker for a good Australian accent, so she could read the phone book to me and I'd be quite pleased with that. So what I think is really important for us to remember today when we talk about this is that we are all working and living through an trauma-induced lens. And what makes it particularly difficult for non-Indigenous people to understand the complexity of the Indigenous issue, not by any fault of your own, but you can't understand completely the impacts of something that you haven't lived through. And I'll give a reference to, you see someone with a broken arm and you think, oh, wow, that must be really uncomfortable or hard to deal with. And then you break your own arm and you realize the kind of tentacles that impact has on your day-to-day living. Well, this is true for the mental health and well-being of our communities. Yes, they need to be run by our community members, and there needs to be ongoing support. Because every time we talk about this, it stirs up, it pokes a stick at a wound that we have inside. We may be aware of it in the moment and we may not. So oftentimes we're walking around dealing with stuff we're not sure where it's coming from. I'm also a believer in generational blood memory. And sometimes the trauma that we're feeling isn't ours, it's ancestral. So it's very important for Indigenous people to take very good care of themselves, and for non-Indigenous people to communicate with us and ask us respectful questions. If you're unsure how to ask an Indigenous person something, ask how you could receive that question yourself. We are all humans. We all have the same feelings. We all know what it's like to be disrespected, feared, and have to deal with someone's rage. So don't let that become a catechism between our ability to love and understand each other. And so with that, I'm going to offer you one of my favorite prayers, and I hope you'll understand why at the end of it. And once again, thank you for giving me the time to share a few words. O Great Spirit, whose voice we hear on the winds, whose breath gives life to the whole world, hear us. We come before you. We are your children. We are small and weak. We need your strength, not to fight our greatest enemy, but to be able to fight ourselves. Let our hands feel the things that you have taught us, the lessons you hidden in every leaf and rock. Let us see what is below the surface. Let us see with our heart. I ask that each and every person here today, when you learn something, that you take that and you teach it with someone else. My teaching is that nothing is mine until I've taught it to someone else. So it's important that we share that. It's important that we stand up to injustices wherever we see them. And that goes for all of us. If we see something that's wrong, if you can safely say something without causing physical harm to yourself or others, then do so. Don't become a passive person in our human rights issues. Disabilities, those that are visible, are easier to recognize, but many of our disabilities are below the surface, are with how we see and feel things. So thank you very much for having this wonderful event. I think it is just amazing that we're doing this, and I really wish you a great day. Thank you. Chimiquench.
Thank you so much, Elder Joanne. It's really amazing to have you here. What I'd like to now do is actually open the event and start today's proceeding by first of all introducing our four panelists. Our first one is Dr. John Ward, who is a HR advisor in the Government of Canada, where he currently supports the area of disability, Indigenous knowledge, ethics, as well as equity, diversity and inclusion. He also is a facilitator on sharing and learning circles. He's worked in disability, primary learning disabilities and dyslexia for the majority of his life. Above all, he excels at passing on knowledge that will make a difference within the area he works and volunteers in, and is actually the lead international editor of this book. The next is Lexi Giizhigokwe Nahwegiizhic, and who is an inspirational leader and keynote speaker, frequently called upon for her wisdom in Indigenous teachings and mental health. She has a contagious enthusiasm and strives to empower people to become prouder, stronger, and more resilient. Her background is in neuroscience, where she uses her gift for teaching to serve as a translator between science and business realities. The next is Diane Rudakenga, and she is a seasoned professional with over 15 years of experience specialising in mental health, neurodiversity, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging within the workplace. As a neurodivergent cisgendered woman and a Black African Canadian mother, Diane champions intersectionality in every facet of the professional and advocacy efforts. Her identity and experiences deeply inform her human-centric leadership at Rudakenga Solutions, a platform she founded to enhance workplace environments by prioritising mental health and wellbeing. And finally, Elder Tom Dearhouse has Kanakahaka and Anishinaabe ancestry. He has been a journalist, firefighter, ambulance technician, and band council chief. He brings traditional knowledge and practices and life experiences to work and personal life, having soaked up stories and teachers through oral tradition. Elder Tom will be starting today's book launch with a smudging ceremony. So thank you, Elder Tom. We're honoured to have your presence and willingness to share your traditional knowledge. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone say, can you say Gway? Can you say Gway, Gway? Can you say Sego? Can you say Sego, what one would I be? Good try, we'll work on that one. These are ways to say hello, and I just want to kind of put everyone at ease. And it's a fitting thing to be asked to do a purification ceremony or a smudging ceremony or release. I think the overall purpose is to begin this day, this gathering, with a good mind, a good, clear mind. And so it's a nice follow-up from Elder Joanne's words, and they were good words. And so I'm going to burn medicine today. It's sage, two medicines, sage and sweetgrass. If you want to think about it this way, sage is the first part of just releasing all the things that are negative, dropping it down onto the ground, to the earth, so the earth can take care of that. And the second part is the sweetgrass, which is more of a gentle medicine, and that's you make motions like this to receive the positive energy that's coming your way. And this is a good start. And so some of the words that I use is cleaning the eyes, cleaning the ears, the obstruction in your ears, kind of cleaning. You have nothing in your throat, kind of cleaning that throat, your airway. You can speak good words, see good things, and hear all these good words today. And I also tie it into kind of like a condolence ceremony, which is a common thing for Mohawk people. I'm Mohawk and Anishinaabe. What this condolence is, we have to acknowledge that sometimes things happen in our lives. We lose loved ones, or some significant things happen. Loss of a job, change in health, these affect us, and that's a grief response. But all this medicine will do its job to kind of get us in a frame of mind to begin our gathering. So here, I'll begin. This is the sage. Those in the room, they get the benefit of symbolic smudging. For those who are online, you get the benefits of my words. I hope this helps in a symbolic way to clean your mind, to release that negative energy. And the second part is with the sweetgrass, which is kind of associated as a feminine medicine, gentle, and it's hard to keep lit, so it means you really have to take your time to keep it lit. But it's also medicine, one of the four big medicines that does its job to purify and set the stage for the work that begins. that a simple way, simple ceremony. And I'm pleased that there's no alarms that have gone off. But I hope this finds a place in your heart and rests gently on your mind, and to have a good, clear mind as you begin our discussions. So with that, we'll turn it over to the next part of the agenda. Yawa, which.
Thank you so much. I'd now like to welcome Dr. John Ward to present an overview of the book.
Perfect. Kwekwe John, Kichisipi, Namijabi. My name is John. I come from Kichisipi, Algonquin territory in Quebec. My father is Métis from Northern Ontario. My mother is Algonquin French Canadian. That's my ancestry. I wanted to say thank you for having the opportunity to bring this here forward. It's been a process of mine, a lengthy process I've been looking at, and I'm going to be sharing how I came about this book into four parts, which I'll be talking about. Would be the first of reasoning behind the book, layout of the book, three, reflecting distinctions-based approach, so showing the different Indigenous perspectives, four, commonalities among authors from a global perspective, and finally, Indigenous disability research. So thank you, Karen. Thank you, Toronto Metropolitan University. First one there. That's okay, I got it. I wanted to first thank a good friend and a relation of mine, Juan Camilo Carrero Vasquez, who, from his steadfast dedication and a sport of Indigenous knowledge, connected me with Indigenous people in Colombia and Venezuela. He was situated in a unique place, working with people in that area, and I was able to go there a few times and eventually be honored and welcomed into the Yukpa community, which is on the border of Colombia, Venezuela, and a small town called Cúcuta. They go between both countries. Always a technical difficulty. So looking at the publication, the reasoning. So when I first did my PhD, I originally did a master's in history on Indigenous policy, gender equality on Bill C-31. So it was very legal. My supervisor, George Siwi of the Huron-Wendat Nation, was the first nation to get a PhD. And I asked him, I said, George, what am I going to do for a PhD? He said, you can do this, you do different things. It's like, well, you're Indigenous, you got Indigenous background, and you struggle with different types of disabilities, and you've seen, and you got a big passion for it. It's like, why don't you stick both together? And saying that when you do a PhD, it has to come, it's not something you just see online or something you think is a hobby. It's something that follows you, and something that you're going to do from day one to the end. And I can see myself as kind of like the seventh generation teaching. I looked at myself as starting it and then finally at the end. Difficult topic for my supervisor, who was non-Indigenous, because she looked at every little step. So I wanted to see how I could do it. So I ended up applying to a PhD in Indigenous disabilities, because I wanted to look at the differences, and then having friends and family who often didn't identify with a disability because it was a colonial label. It was also very negative. And in my PhD, which I finished last year, I looked at different ways of understanding disabilities from elders. I had different elders who contributed their knowledge to allow me to understand how they could influence the study of Indigenous disability. And when I looked upon them, the elders that I had, I wanted to make sure, and I told my committee, I said, I don't want to ask an elder a question. I find it very offensive to ask an elder, my teaching from my elders, to say, ask a question. I wanted to know how their knowledge flowed the topic. Just like water how water flows naturally. If you contain water, it eventually dies. So the knowledge of disability, how they understood disability from their traditional perspectives, how that influenced it. So I didn't have a traditional PhD. I had one with, I was lucky to have two Indigenous faculty members. I had Ojibwa from Lakehead, and I had a Cherokee from Valdosta University in Georgia. And their knowledge allowed me to refocus, and I even had to take longer to decolonize the language, because I said, when I'm working with elders, once you get the ethics from the university, you're supposed to be finished. But every time I visit an elder, I offered a tobacco or strawberries for the different ones, and I said, can I have your knowledge and have that each time? And every time they said yes, and every time I reviewed it. So every time I had to go back and see them. So I wanted to make sure that even the language, I would have to make sure to say, I'm not going to take your information, and I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to sell it, and I'm going to quantify it. I want to get rid of all that decolonizing language. So I said, how's your knowledge understand disability from your perspective? They said it, I printed it out, and I said, here you go. They edited it, and everything was done with them. So it was a real one-on-one. It took a few years longer. I told the university that's the way we have to do it, or else I won't do a PhD. I'm not going to offend my elders. So then, after my PhD, what do? Lucky I got a job. I even recently got a posting at the University of Sydney online. Thank God, because a 14-hour difference would be very difficult, and I needed to be here and connected to my own relations here. So in that post, often when people have a PhD, they have so many avenues. I could have done Indigenous methodologies, decolonizing language. I could have done so many things. I said, let's look at about how perspective of disability are looked upon. And I've seen how my elders talked about it, and even how some Hopi teachings, and I've seen some in Guatemala and in Yukpa, and I've even seen some down in Guatemala. So different perspectives, and even some colleagues over in Australia and New Zealand talking about a lot of similarities, how there was never a word for disability until colonialism. They don't look at it at the negative, they look at the abilities, they look at the positive. So I said, okay, let's see if this is something not just Canada and Turtle Island, let's see if this is something globally. So I managed to reach out to various people and connect on that. And I wanted to look upon not just disabilities from Canada, but globally. And as one of my contributors, I'll give a chapter, Chief Phil Jane Jr., who's Dakota and Chickasaw from Kansas. He said, we must acknowledge that the human family is distinct, and no society or culture is superior to another. We are unique. Every human being has a soul is unique. No piece of grain is the same on every beach of the world. There's no single piece of sand the same. We are all part of the human family, and through our differences, we will change the mindset of what has been established to what could be different, not disabled. Right here. Am I clicking it right here? Up there. Oh, back up. All right. So looking at the layout. So this is the layout of the book. This is the 5 sections of the book. Looking upon this area here. When designing this book, I wanted the readers to understand disability from a multitude of perspectives, including different knowledge systems of elders, because often elders are not excluded, but often not included in publications. I also wanted to look at different perspectives, but also the reframing of the narrative, how we view disability from different ways, learning from within, and also giving how traditional knowledge can influence a global perspective. Looking at the challenges of colonialism authority as a way of challenging the negative effects of colonialism, and how these various methods of abuse, labels, assessments, classifications, teacher training have all impacted the health, well-being, and ability to function in society, needed to be addressed. And finally, gathered the perspectives of those who might not always be able to share their thoughts, such as social workers, frontline workers, pastoral workers, PhD students, senior government officials, and community members. So here's a table of content. So through 33 chapters of 20 countries representing 38 distinct Indigenous groups, tribes, nations, I wanted to give a kind of a global perspective. Now, I had many call outs. I had a lot of people who couldn't because of COVID, because of family restrictions, because they weren't able to. But the call out was there, and many people came. And this is something that I wanted to look at. And also within looking at these, there's also different types of Indigenous approaches to methodologies, such as two-eyed seeing. Two-eyed seeing is a Mi'kmaq understanding from looking at from one side colonial and the other side Indigenous. So having two perspectives to understand how we can look at it, a health or educational perspective. Also looking at indigenization of critical disability theory, as critical disability theory often excludes Indigenous knowledge and belief systems. And so going from Indigenous perspective, we have to infuse it with Indigenous knowledge and teachings to make it more inclusive. There's also the sweetgrass method, the medicine wheel, 7 grandfather teachings, sometimes called 7 grandmother teachings, depending where you come from, dream weaving, and Indigenous deaf methodologies. Just, everybody see that there? Kind of hard to see from here. Is that right? This is the other page. So these people, they're all various from different perspectives. I got one on top. Kevin Morgan is my mentor for our work in the government of Canada. He's blind and he's a senior executive, and through his wisdom and teachings helped me as navigating as an Indigenous government employee. This is a few other ones here from different people. I've had people across Turtle Island and in Latin America and around the world. So I wrote 2 chapters myself addressing dyslexia, which I've seen from many friends and family. We talk about dyslexia as the good and not necessarily the bad parts. I also got about 30 or 40 pictures. I wanted them to be colored, but unfortunately I had to be black and white. So in the color, there's some the pictures of some elders or sages, because some people, they wrote in English, French, Spanish, in their own language. I had to get it translated, so it took a little longer. I wanted to reflect them, so they said their stories come from this elder, so we have to show the elder, which makes sense, because if not, it would be like we're stealing the information, the knowledge. And finally, this is the last page. I wanted to include places like Africa, South America, and Oceanic Asia, because often, from what I found out, those have been often excluded or not included in the conversation. And I wanted to include those perspectives, because if you're going to give a global perspective, it's kind of hard to have a global perspective when you only got 2 or 3 countries represented. So these are the 38 distinct Indigenous groups. So some from all different places there. I got some here in Colombia. Phil, got some Indonesia. I got Australia. Got New Orleans. Different ones across. Now, some names might be seem different, but I have some that are American and some that are Canadian, because sometimes some words in Canada might be different from American. But I asked them and said that's the way they want it to be called, and that's what they are. So I had I think I had one. Got one from Alaska, New Orleans, and a few from around Minnesota and Georgia. Oh, sorry. I'm also going to be looking of looking at the medicine wheel. So the medicine wheel for my teachings is to understand disability through the knowledge. So how do we look at disabilities from the spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical? So for my teaching, for my elders, was that when you understand each 4 parts, so how do you feel spiritual? So you use the medicine wheel as a way of understanding. So you look spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, and if one of them is not as strong or weak, we have to understand why that is. And I look at disability through those 4 parts. So this is, I mean, here, so the pictures weren't stolen, they're actually me, so, I had my mother take this picture, this is, on the water of the, Mississippi, the Otter, the big water, in Algonquin, the Otter River is where the river widens, so the big people of the river. And that one there to understand, spiritual connections, so if you take spiritual connections, some of the teachings that I've received from elders would say that the spirit is pure, and it goes into a body that will have trouble or challenges later on. That spirit being divine, being pure, goes into that. And who are we to judge the creator? If the spirit is pure, who are we to judge that? So looking from a spiritual connection, but also looking at how different connections look through that as a good way of looking at it. You know, and also how this reflects different challenges and moving forward is a way that we can look at through spiritually, because spiritual connections can help us, but also through smudging and understanding that, yes, I can have a disability, but no, I'm not stupid, I'm not disabled. It's just a part of who I am, and it's actually a strength and not the strength, or sometimes people call it superpower, but it's not negative. It's just the system, colonial system, that doesn't understand me. Also looking at mental connections. I took this picture when I was actually with Elder Tom a few years ago near Sudbury, Sonoma, at a former residential school, understanding the difference of mental connection. As this is the outside of the residential school, it burnt down, and some of the elders who I spoke to, residential schools in Canada, but industrial schools in the United States, were saying when they went in, they went in as Indian, they came out different, they came out able, they came out disabled. So the whole mentality and the mindset as the teachers were said that they're superior. We had to like break down the mindset that's saying it's like Elder, like Chief Phil Jane Jr. said, that we have to break down the mindset that, you know, there's not one culture that's superior over the other. You know, and understanding this mental understanding is something that we want to look at, and it's something that some elders and Indigenous people that went into residential schools unfortunately had a bad experience, and it's through these experiences they're able to come out resilient and understanding. And that's why, because of residential school, a lot of elders I spoke to and Indigenous colleagues and friends, because of their experiences, they don't want to say I have a disability. And where I work in the government, there's different benefits for Indigenous people, for taxation, for funding, for scholarship. But often they don't want to say they have a disability because they're saying, I'm not bad, I don't have a problem. So sometimes we have to change the language and saying, you know what, it doesn't mean in a negative way, it's just we have to do this, you know, the colonial mumbo jumbo and policies. It's very confusing, even for people who work and study in the area. I wanted to give a look at the other connection, the spiritual connection. It's something to look at that can be different for different perspectives. I wanted to show the Hopi flute player, as traditionally there's a humpback, but when it comes to marketing, he has no humpback. So a lot of traditional teachings I've seen, and from what colleagues have told me, there are traditional teachings like the false face, the Haudenosaunee false face. It might look disfigured from a non-Indigenous perspective, but yet the teachings, there's a teaching behind that, and through those teachings we don't change the face. There's a reason why there's like that. I know one of my elders was telling me that that there was when a child was born to parents who, you know, the parents were fighting, and the child had Down syndrome. That child who has Down syndrome, they never get mad. They're always happy. They got full of life. So that child went into that body. It was a pure spirit. Went into that body, and it knew what it would do. And that family became closer. So that family came closer, and it was a form of healing. And that's one thing that elder told me and inspired me to show that because it's different, we don't have to change it. Now, of course, it's a marketing, and you know, marketing, they like to do different things, and I find that's unfortunately wrong, but different. And also how some people would say, you know, I see a person, here's Jake, here's the person who's obese, or the person in the wheelchair. Regardless of what the person appears or the challenges, there's still the person who's there. So looking beyond the disabilities looking beyond that is often what people strive for, and sometimes people are stuck in that understanding. But it's often traditional teaching. They look at the person, then the person of the person, like the inner person of it. There's also peacemaker. There's many Indigenous teachings that have people who would stutter, who became speakers, people who had challenges but rose up and became the leaders who they are. And there's a rich history of that in different nations, tribes, and mobs. And just touching the surface, and this book has a few of those, and hopefully more later on. Looking at that, I took this at the Ecososny a few years ago when I was with the Indigenous Student Association at my university, looking at the emotional connection, because I look at this, I was like, wow, that looks great. So how does the emotional connection connect people? 10 minutes left. I'm like an elder. I get to keep on talking and talking and talking. I remember to shut up. Good job. No, thanks. That seems better. So how do we look at victimization? How does that suffering, the emotional journey, how do we navigate our own pain and trauma by accessing traditional knowledge as a way of empowering us, but also saying, hey, you know what? My traditional knowledge is just as equal as yours. And even though I have a PhD, I don't stop there. I never look as a researcher. I always hate the university. I said, I'm not a researcher. A researcher goes in, as a colleague told me in Australia, a researcher flocks in and flocks out. When there's research money and funds, I look at it as a knowledge seeker. I seek the knowledge. The elders share the knowledge to me. I understand it. I put it in different perspectives. I share differently through sharing circles, through understanding, and then I give the knowledge back to the elders or through somebody else. It's that understanding. I don't own the land. I don't own the knowledge. It's a connection that we have. Looking at some challenges of disability knowledge and the research of disability studies in Turtle Island, which is Canada, all down to Panama. Looking at settler on one side and Indigenous on the other, not saying always negative and bad, but often the disability and the ableism. So the different perspectives, and this gives a two-eyed seeing approach that I was faced to when I was doing my PhD, but also in the literature and understanding that, there are positive attributes, we're very good at oral history, hand talk, sign language, 3D thinking, cartograph. We're able to navigate in a certain area and be fine, not getting lost in the bush. Mind mapping, having superior visual spatial abilities. I've seen reports from friends up north since the 1960s that talked about that. There's many, there's also blood knowledge that the Elder Joanne talked about. So sometimes in blood knowledge, we have those positive characteristics, but because of colonialism, they made it sound bad and very negative because they often don't look at it and understand that. Just like how Turtle Island, if you see a picture, it actually looks like North America. And people are like, oh, how's that possible? They didn't have satellite back then. Well, they had the knowledge that they can project and they can see. Like if you go on top of a building, I can look at that building across there, visualize myself being on that building and looking down, and it'll be 90% accurate. So that's part of the superior visual spatial ability. And you can get out of the writing. A lot of university exams, it's writing and reading, or orally, it's kind of newish. That in the last 10, 20 years. I had an elder who was doing drumming, songs, dances, oral depictions, beading. I've got a beaded medallion that I have the knowledge from my elders through my PhD and a beaded medallion. And that's what I use besides the writing. But one medallion, a 450-page text. So you save a lot more trees in one medallion. Outcomes, what do the elders share and the authors reveal? Getting that, through the different elders, there's about over 500 years of knowledge, because as an elder's experience, to be an elder and also be Indigenous, you got your low and your highs. And that's the lifestyle that my elders were saying. You got your down problem, the community, or even academia, or the government, whoever it is, they put you down, then eventually you go up. So through Creator or God, even if you want to look at it, so I got to look at it for Creator, how he helps us. So when you go down, that's when you struggle, and then eventually when you get back up, that's a reward that you see you're up and down. So it's not always straight through. And trying to navigate disability or understanding knowledge, it's like going through the bush, trying to go through the forest. You might start here and you want to go straight, not like you are in the city here, but you might have to go around the bush, around the tree, around the pond. You're going to get to where you want to get. Eventually, you might be off 100, 200 feet, but you got there in the end, and that's what matters. What knowledge systems were revealed? There's so many knowledge systems in the text, which is great, and I learned so many more. What ways to gather knowledge? There's like drumming, singing, sign language. There's various. We have 2 chapters on sign, and how the language changed. I was able to decolonize, and I wrote a directive for the government of Canada how to decolonize the language. We're working with Indigenous people to be not offensive. You know, I would never talk to an elder and say I'm a researcher. So how do we decolonize language to be more effective? 5 minutes. Okay. Kwe, thank you, Marcy, Tineway, Marce, Nawe. Thank you to all my past and present and future relations. I actually made it. I thought I had any more slides there.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry. I better go up there. Oh, sorry. Am I going back? No, wait. Where am I going? Sorry, that's
Thank you so much, John. That was a great overview. So now we have our first contributor, or separate panelist, who's going to talk a little bit about the book. So I'd like to welcome Diane, do you want to press the next slide? Yes. She's going to talk a little bit about her personal journey with its association. I do have a quiet voice, so please let me know if you need me to speak up here. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. So first, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land we are gathering on today. And I want to personally pay my respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. So I also want to extend my my gratitude to louder. Huh? That's what I'm thinking. I'm gonna. So I also wanted to extend my gratitude to Dr. Karen Soldertis and her team at the CERC and Dr. John Ward for the opportunity to share my journey with you. So my name is Diane Rudakenga, and it's an honor to be part of this pioneer book on Indigenous Disability Studies. So my chapter, Weaving a Human-Centric Tapestry, is a reflection of my life's journey, a vibrant tapestry woven with threads of resilience, identity, and transformation. I was born to Rwandan parents. My name also reflects a narrative of colonial influence and Indigenous resilience. Umuhoza and Rudakenga in my culture mean healer and intrepid, symbolizing the strength and healing that defined my path. So my journey begins in Burundi in 1983. I was born to Rwandan Tutsi refugee parents who fled the growing violence in Rwanda. Our move to Quebec City in 1988 marked the beginning of new challenges, racism, isolation, and the struggle to belong. Despite these challenges, I found resilience and empathy within the immigrant community where storytelling and communal healing were our anchor. Growing up as often the only Black student in my class, I faced both overt and covert racism. I still remember being called the N-word at the age of 5 and being physically attacked in 3rd grade, marking the beginning of my journey with racial trauma. These experiences, though fraught with pain, were instrumental in shaping my resilience. They instill in me a profound sense of empathy, the importance of community bonds, and the courage to advocate for justice. Amidst these adversities, I also silently grapple with ADHD, which went undiagnosed for many years. The isolation and racial trauma exacerbated my ADHD symptoms, leading to chronic anxiety and a depressive episode. My teenage years were particularly challenging as I struggled with self-mutilation and failed a suicide attempt. It was at that time my school principal who noticed the change in my behavior and guided me to the school social worker, introducing me to therapy for the first time. Of course, later in life, motherhood brought immense joy, but also highlighted the challenges I had been masking for many years. The demand of parenting made it increasingly difficult to hide my struggle, leading to burnout and severe depression. It was a friend who is here today with me who suggested I might have ADHD, a possibility I had never seriously considered. So this suggestion led me to seek a formal diagnosis which I received in September 2019. This diagnosis for me was not just a label. It was a revelation that helped me understand my differences and how I process information. As a Black cisgender African Canadian woman, my experiences are shaped by multiple intersecting identities. Kimberly Crenshaw's framework of intersectionality has been pivotal in understanding the multifaceted nature of my experiences. So navigating life as a neurodivergent individual add another layer of complexity. ADHD is often misunderstood and underdiagnosed, especially in women and people of color. So this intersection of race, gender, and neurodiversity present unique challenges, but also opportunities for growth and resilience. So living at the intersection of these identities mean facing systemic barriers that affect access to mental health care, societal acceptance, and professional opportunities. The stigma associated with mental health and neurodiversity amplify these challenges. So, however, it fuels my advocacy for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Because for me, my narrative intersects with professional acumen, lending authenticity to my advocacy effort and highlighting the importance of understanding and embracing the full spectrum of human diversity. So my family history is deeply intertwined with the anti-Tutsi sentiment that later accumulated in the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. This historical context has had a profound impact on my understanding of intergenerational trauma. The 10 stages of genocide, as outlined by Gregory Stanton, provide a framework to understand the systemic dehumanization and violence that my family endured. So from classification and symbolization to dehumanization, polarization, and extermination, each stage left indelible marks on our collective psyche. Also, colonialism exacerbated these stages, sowing seed of division and hatred that would later manifest in such horrific violence. So understanding this history has been crucial in recognizing how deeply colonialism has impacted our intergenerational trauma. It has also been instrumental in my personal healing journey as I navigate the legacy of fear, mistrust, and resilience passed down through generations. Right, okay, quick. So my Rwandan roots are an integral part of my identity and have profoundly shaped my story. The communal approach to life, the importance of storytelling, dance, music, arts, and the resilience of my ancestor are all elements that I carry with me. These cultural values have been my anchor, providing strength and grounding in times of adversities. Also, supporting others in my community has been a cornerstone of my healing, my healing journey. Is by helping others navigate their own challenges, I found solace and purpose. This reciprocal relationship of support and healing underscored the importance of community in our individual and collective well-being. So my lived experience has significantly shaped also my career and educational path. Working in the field of disability management for over a decade, I have witnessed firsthand the systemic barrier faced by individuals with disabilities. These experiences have fueled my passion for advocacy and informed my approach to creating more inclusive environment. Also, despite working in this field, I struggle with the stigma and internalized ableism associated with disability, which prevented me from identifying as a person with a disability for many years. This internalized stigma was a barrier to fully embracing my identity and advocating for myself. And it wasn't until I received my ADHD diagnosis that I began to understand and accept my disability, which has been transformative in both my personal and professional life. So my story exemplifies the intersectionality of race, gender, and neurodiversity. Drawing from Kimberly Crenshaw framework, I navigated the complexities of being a Black woman with ADHD in a predominantly white society. Crenshaw's work illuminated how overlapping systems of oppression affected my access to mental health care and societal acceptance. My lived experience, almost done. My lived experience makes me part of the lost girl of ADHD. So Kathleen G. Nadeau works on ADHD in girls resonated deeply with me. Her insight helped me understand my own journey where symptoms like inattentiveness were often overlooked. So this understanding was also crucial in embracing my neurodiversity. Also, Monica Williams' exploration of racial trauma underscore the profound impact on racism on mental health. Her work provided a framework for understanding my early experiences of racism and their long-term impact on my mental health. Martin Seligman's work on positive psychology aligned with my approach to embracing neurodiversity. His emphasis on strength and well-being echoes my belief in focusing on the positive aspect of our diverse identities. Seligman's concept of flourishing, which means thriving in various aspects of life despite challenges, has been particularly influential in my approach to managing ADHD, emphasizing the importance of recognizing and building upon my strength rather than solely focusing on deficit. So also in aligning with my Rwandan heritage, I recognize the significance of non-Western Indigenous perspective in understanding mental health and disability. Our approach to healing is communal, interwoven with storytelling, culture, and anchored in the wisdom of our elders. So this challenged the often individualistic and pathologizing lens of Western psychology, offering a holistic community-centered view of mental health. Okay, so through my story, I invite you to view the world with empathy, understanding, and inclusivity. By acknowledging and celebrating our full selves, we paved the way. For a world where diversity is cherished. So I want us to kind of, with that, let's commit to creating an environment where every voice is heard, every identity honored, and every individual thrive. Because I believe that together we can build an inclusive, compassionate, and empathetic world, valuing the rich tapestry of human experiences in all of its complexity and beauty. So to end, I want to encourage you all to reflect on your own stories and the thread that weaves the tapestry of your lives. So let's continue to support one another in our journey toward healing and empowerment. And I want to end this with a quote. As we weave our story together, may we create a fabric strong enough to hold us all. Thank you. Merci. Murakoze.
Thanks so much, Diane. That was really incredible overview of the chapter and how you the story. And now I want to open up to Lexi, who will be presenting on your chapter that you're doing.
Yeah. So if you want, we can just go to the main screen because I don't have slides.
You have nothing? Okay.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. Ayuujk Nahwegiizhic So my traditional name is Giizhigokwe Nahwegiizhic, which means little sky woman, and when the sun is highest in the moon. So my spiritual elements are the sun and the moon. My non-traditional name is Lexi. I am really honored to be here to talk to you guys today. How does sound okay? Working? Take them. So when it came to my chapter, what I really looked at was neurodiversity. So I studied neuroscience and mental health at Carleton University. It was a wonderful program. I also, growing up as a child, was fortunate enough to grow up on my First Nation reserve with my elders and receive a lot of the teachings from my community. And as I was entering into my late teens, early 20s, I started to realize that there was a very big disconnect between these two worlds. As a kid, I was very smart. I was very good at math. I was very good at spelling and grammar and very strong academically. And so when I had struggles as I got a little bit older, my teachers didn't care. They didn't have time to focus on the A+ student who was starting to fall behind on their homework. They needed to help the students who were failing. And so I got left behind, and I had to teach myself how to navigate this education system that wasn't built to support me. And with a lot of fighting, I did eventually start getting diagnoses, but again, the teachers did not care. And I remember one teacher asking me, how can you be smart but dyslexic and Indigenous? Pick one. Which sounds very silly, and I agree, because that means that no, I can't be smart and Indigenous, nor can I be dyslexic and smart, and apparently I can't be Indigenous and dyslexic either. So that didn't make any sense and didn't help at all. So I definitely shut down and stayed away from ever explaining what was wrong with me and what support I really needed. As I started learning about the brain, I came to learn about neurodiversity and how the Western world describes neurodiversity. Because let me be clear, my education was a Western education. It definitely was not a traditional education. So I got to learn how the Western world defines neurodiversity. And it's actually quite simple. I'm sure all of you have put a puzzle together before, right? Perfect. So in a puzzle, you have 1,000 pieces, and every single one of those pieces is cut differently, colored differently, designed differently. However, you need every single one of those pieces to make that full image. If you're missing just one, your picture is incomplete. And that, in a sense, is what neurodiversity is. Neurodiversity is the description of how every single one of our brains is unique and different. How we develop in the uterus as we are an embryo is completely different from one another. It could be environmental, it could be genetics. There's a list of factors that change how our brain develops while we are in our mother's womb. And those connections in our brain will affect how we function after we are born. And so when we look at neurodiversity from a medical perspective, we are looking at the literal biological differences in our brain. And this creates labels. And I started looking at this, I sarcastically say, wonderful mathematician, scientist, Sir Francis Galton from the early 1900s, who he defined statistics and kind of created this envision of what is normal and what is abnormal. And through his science, they were able to determine which humans should be allowed to reproduce and which humans should be forcibly sterilized and not allowed to have children. This is what came from his science. And this description of normal and abnormal was used in the Nazi regime. It was used in the States and Canada all the way through. It was apparently abolished after World War II, but there were still cases of Indigenous women being forcibly sterilized up into the 70s, 80s, 90s, and possibly even further. So when we look at what is normal and abnormal, as we look at what is a disability focuses on what is abnormal, what is wrong with you. It doesn't look at what are you good at. They don't care what you're good at. They only care what you're bad at. And that's how the Western world defines disability, neurodiversity. They create labels that make you different. But the reality is we are all different. That's the definition of being human. We are all a puzzle piece and none of us are the same. And with my traditional side, I knew that when I was growing up, although my teachers didn't support me, my Western societal teachers, my elders did. They saw me for who I was, for my strengths. They always encouraged me to go after the things that I was good at and to not focus on the things that I was struggling with. And near the end of my studies, I put a lot more focus on reconnecting with my culture because I realized that the answers that I was looking for on what was wrong with me was actually a disconnect from my culture. I wasn't connected with my spirit. I wasn't looking at what am I good at. I was looking for what am I bad at? And that wasn't the right approach. And so in my chapter, I do cover a little bit of the 7 grandfather teachings because I believe that those teachings are what ground us to looking at another human being as a human being instead of looking at disabilities. So when we have humility, our dibaden zizowin, we are looking at thinking of ourselves as equal. We are thinking low of ourselves. We don't put one above the other. We are looking at ourselves as not anything more or less. We are equal, and not just with humans, with all life, with plants, with animals, with the sun and the stars, with every living creation. With honesty, we are looking at being proper to ourselves. So one thing that I learned with my neurodiversity was I masked a lot. I hid behind a mask. I pretended I was someone I was not. I pretended to not have disabilities, and all that did was hurt me. So honesty is not putting on that mask and just embracing who we are, our gifts and our talents, instead of trying to be someone we're not. We have respect, pardon. That's to go easy on others. So when we respect other people, we treat them like family. We understand that they go through hardships and difficult times just as we do, but we don't judge them for it. We come to them with compassion and care. We have love, which to love someone, you have to have a strong, I'm skipping one. We have courage. We are strong of heart. Strong of heart means that we do the things that are difficult, even when they're difficult, right? To be brave, to be courageous, and to maybe step out and be yourself. We have wisdom, which wisdom covers having knowledge and sharing it with others. And as John was doing with the book, not taking that knowledge and saying it's yours and profiting off of it, but wanting to share information for the benefit of all. Being wise, but sharing your knowledge, not keeping it to yourself. Zagadewin is your love. And that's to love each other, reciprocal. You have to have love between both partners. You can't just love one person and say, I love you, but not you. That's not love. Unconditional means everybody. You're looking at life. You love life, not characteristics. And then our truth, our debwili. When you're telling the truth, truth kind of embraces all of the other teachings. You're looking at living a proper life and living true to all teachings to have to walk the best life forward, making the most out of your journey. And so one of the ways that I like to kind of put it all together. So if you have a life that you value over somebody else, there's no love, there is no respect, and there is no humility. We cannot learn from one another if we do not appreciate wisdom. And without courage to be ourselves, we hide behind a mask of dishonesty. Without all of these other teachings, we lose sight of the truth. So what is neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is just a medical model to describe the unique characteristics of each human being. But in a lot of Indigenous cultures, we don't have that definition because we already see people as unique individuals. And rather than focusing on what people can't do, we focus on what they can do. And that quality of life, that vision of respect would benefit the Western world greatly. And so I hope that you take this knowledge and keep it in mind the next time you see someone, or even if you define yourself as someone with a neurodiverse condition. Remember, you're not disabled. You're you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lexi. And I'd now like to invite Elder Tom, who's going to give a final overview of the chapter.
I'll have to say at the start, 10 minutes is probably not enough to cover what I want to say, so I'll give it my best shot. I'll do my best. I guess in reviewing my chapter, it's divided into two ways. A lot of it is life and work experience, being a social worker, with mental health clientele, doing ambulance work as well. So all this wide range of experience. But also the second part would be traditional teachings that really blessed to sit with some elders, not just through work, but in different contexts outside of work. And so really it's a resource that it's kind of untapped, but it exists if you want to go seek it out, or sometimes it just kind of falls into your lap. And that's a good way of learning too. You just have to recognize it for what it is. So it's like, and I've heard this phrase, two-eyed seeing. I know of it. I prefer the Mohawk style using the wampum belts, the two-row wampum, if you know what that is. Gasawanta, meaning two parallel paths. One is Western way and one is Indigenous way. And they both kind of go parallel, and neither one should. Well, some people say this. Some people say you should stay in your own lane, you don't crisscross. Other teachers, which I value more, this one, is that some people have the ability to go to the other ship, to the other path, and be like an ambassador, be a liaison, know the other side, and actually to become a better helper if they utilize both the Western and the Indigenous. And so I think in the last 10 years especially, that's where I am, walking two paths, two-eyed seeing, if you want to call it that, but just being me, just being where I am. And so getting back to what's the origin of me and John? When did we meet? 2, 3, no, longer than that. Yeah. Not sure how long, but we helped organization in Ottawa. We had some gatherings. I knew he was studying, and then lo and behold, he outreaches to me and asked to interview me, and I wanted to help him. And the questions were challenging in the sense that it made me think and testing me. And so this was easier to come out. The work experiences dealing with schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, Asperger's, these kind of people. And I heard through my work, I heard, you know, some people, it's not for them. But I found I gravitated toward that, or I felt comfortable with that because I could find the people's gifts. I could kind of discern after a short while what their life purpose was. And this is like an overarching theme too, one's life's purpose. And I think I mentioned this to John several times. I might as well get into it now. We believe the life starts in heaven, Garunyagi spirit. Life starts there in the spirit world, and a baby chooses their parents. I don't know if you've ever heard that. It seems like a strange thing, strange concept to some, but a baby will choose their parents where he's going to go. And at that specific time, it's almost he knows his or her life's purpose already. And my teachers also talk about life lessons. And I think we can understand that some things happen if we're in burnout situations, if we experience loss, if we experience trauma. These are life lessons, and what we make of it depends on us and people around us, but mainly us and spirit and spiritual connections. So that's what I told John about life's purpose, and it also leads to like a modern day question: is why do bad things happen to good people? It's the life lesson part, it's the spiritual part that the baby coming down has life lessons to work on their own, but also the parent, the caregivers also have life lessons to learn to work through. And if they don't quite achieve it, well, my elders say it through, you have to believe that the spirit is gonna come down for a certain time and then leave and go back to the sky world, but they're bound to come back again to finish the business, finish that unfinished business of whatever their life's purpose was. So in a way, that's kind of like another life. If some people believe that, I tend to believe it because just the teachings are there and that happens. And so these are included. So that's very much a spiritual connection. And I like everything that, looking at the book, just the compilations of the teachings from all the elders that you saw, that would be good enough. But give credit to John, how he formats and puts things together. That's just what the doctor ordered, pun intended. And just give him credit for the formatting of that. Myself, I'm better oral speaking rather than doing any kind of turn page for formatting. It's always a difficult thing. But to his credit, this is a resource that's going to be used, and I've already talked it over with some of my colleagues and our agency, the traditional parenting, and it's going to be used. And not just because I'm included in there, but there's good things, there's good theory and knowledge of inclusivity, and everyone got their own gifts. That's the way we put it. Everyone has their own gift, and it's up to you to kind of work through that to fulfill your life's purpose for a certain time. There's things also in the chapter, Haudenosaunee. Haudenosaunee means people of the longhouse, and it's very much inclusive. I'm still flying high from last week of a great law recital, which had to do with the peacemaker story, the formation of the Iroquois Confederacy and the 50 chiefs. The meeting between Peacemaker and Hiawatha, the origins of the condolence ceremony, that was covered. And by the way, that's in the indigenous languages, Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Mohawk, and a little bit of English in the afternoon. So I really tested my brain and listening to get that, but really and not only that, what's inspiring is there's still wampum belts that are symbolic of the peacemaker's message of peace, power, peace, mutual respect, and friendship, and how to live, basically, how to live in a modern day contact with all its challenges. And that was the peacemaker's purpose. Because he came at a time when, much like other nations, Anishinaabe forgot their way, Mohawks forgot their way. They say around here, well, actually in Tyendinaga, that's where the birthplace of the peacemaker, the Creeks were red with blood, a lot of bloodshed, warfare. So, and then there's not the Anishinaabe too, they forgot their teaching, forgot to be thankful. So there was a prophecy of the eagle. Our Creator was going to send a flood to wash the earth and start anew. But there was a little girl that they thought the eagle spotted, and she was holding her hand with her grandma, saying, I want to give thanks for this day. So the Creator, that's when the world was new. Even Creator was kind of new with the world. So he said, I'm never going to go bring the Thunderbirds to do that again. So it's a pretty cool story, along with the origins of the grandfather teachings on the lodge, the little boy being taken. That was a time when much chaos again, forgot to give thanks. So it's very simple, but human beings have this, this thing in them that they forget. So we need constant reminders, but it's the babies, it's the young ones that can really melt your heart, touch you. Any child, a baby, that's what, and I remember saying this to John, that a big infant, you diagnose or not, they're going to bring a family together. Because we're actually, in reality, it could work both ways. It could tear a family apart, too many challenges, the parents blame each other, the dynamics, or it could bring a family together, a couple together, along with the extended family, along with extra resources in the community. And I think it's really important to say modern day, thanks to what do you call that? Cindy Blackstock and the Canadian Rights, the Human Rights Tribunal. Money has gone into reserve resources, and we're making use of that gun logging. I'm not sure there might be more challenges in the city, but I think you have access to Jordan's principle and funds like that. So these are good things to address this area of special needs. But it's in the general sense, we're all trying to be helpers. We're all trying to be helping for individuals and families and groups. And so in modern day, and so I can talk more about the specifics. There is Medicine Max Hadui. There's a story about those masks. There's stories about Peacemaker and the idea that he was a stutterer and needed help from Hiawatha to spread his message, and he didn't turn back, or he didn't give up. And so I just heard, and even before that, heard that Peacemaker is considered like the greatest mediator, the greatest statesman, the greatest politician, conflict resolution guy, all because he was able not to just work on one people, but he worked on nations. He worked on 5 nations and then 6 to form this house across, and you can even add rafters. You can have other nations to join to make the house even stronger. Or if you'd like the symbolism, the roots of peace spread out in 4 directions, and anyone can trace the roots back to this peace, this tree of peace, a white pine tree, and find comfort in that. And that implies that there's a lot of services, that everyone has a good mind, peace, all inclusive, everyone has a belonging, everyone has their place. And we often talk about peace and a good mind and love and compassion. Skahana, Ganuquatsara, Dandarro, and Dasastasara, the language. I picked that up over last week. Got reminded of that. So as I wind down, hopefully this will, just to give you a preview of to take some questions, I get more focus on some of what I'm saying. It's a beautiful thing, and I thank the speakers before me because they all kind of touched me. So I don't know if I have that special thing, but I try to remember and try to apply it in my works this way I don't forget. And you never know what kind of words are important, of course, but you never know the language that you use to someone in crisis or just a family member, whether they're at work or they're just asking you for advice. You never know that language that you use can help somebody in the end. And maybe sometimes it's not even what you say, it's how you make the person feel. You may not feel accepted, make you feel loved. That's what we all need. We all want acceptance. We all want to be loved and be accepted for who we are. Lastly, the medicine wheel. Yeah, I can answer questions on that. So I'll leave it there. Yeah, I'll go on.
And we're running out of time, but I'm going to ask our four speakers if you can come up and just turn your chairs around, bring your chairs out. And I'm going to open the floor to 10 minutes of questions and on the chat on the slide.
Vehicle chairs.
Okay, so we've got, we don't have any questions in the chat yet. The first note there is when the person will open with Elder Joanne. Are there any questions from the audience? Any questions from the audience? No, shy. Sure. Can you say your name when you open it so that people online?
My name is Sarah Lefebvre. I'm a mature student here at TMU. I actually have a physical as well as a neurodivergent disability. And I open this to whoever wants to, feels confident answering this, but what do you see the outcome of this actually doing to help Indigenous disabled? Like, what is your actual thing you would hope that me as a student is actually going to receive from this?
Oh, yeah. So what I'm hoping is that people will see a different perspective, a more Indigenous perspective than what is offered in the schools. Because schools often just give one side of the story and there's more.
For me, actually, I want to bring representation first. I want to bring other side because there's most of us, you spend your life not fitting in, and there's so much intersectionality to things. So for people to start seeing there's different way, diverse way of living with disability. Also, by doing that, also empowering a lot of people going through that to advocate for themselves and bring more acceptance.
And for me, I touched on it. It's going to be a resource for frontline workers, parents, teachers, just open a discussion on that. So it's going to spread like a good resource should, good information should. That's going to help. Look forward to it.
Yeah, I also wanted to show different perspectives. Like Tom said, I had elders that could have been just by itself. I had social workers, I had frontline community workers, support staff. I had different people. I didn't want to have it just for graduate students and high school teachers. I wanted people to work at friendship centers because I worked at various friendship centers, drop centers, and I've seen the different information. I want to have it that it's a global perspective that your teachings you have can actually impact other people. It's not just, there's a lot of community knowledge that stays there because it's sacred. They don't want to share it out, but a lot of that traditional knowledge, if you use that, you can actually use that to benefit other people and how we look at it. There's a lot of traditional teachings. There's so many of them there that we feel like it's even the language, very few language. I think one in Algonquin, it says a person who learns different as more of a newer type. They didn't have disabled. There was never anything negative. There was never, like my supervisor, George C. used to say, there was never women's abuse, there was never child abuse, there was never any crime, there was never environmental, until colonialism came, and 150 years later, we had all this abuse to Mother Earth, mental abuse, victimization, labeling. We didn't have that before. You learn, and you follow those teachings. So I think that to get over that colonial mindset, I think including different perspectives, it's a book that if you're a teacher, a student, a parent, a single parent, a PhD person who, like myself, had dyslexia, ADHD, I even have light sensitivity. I'm not used to fake lighting, you have indoor lighting, natural lighting. It's something that I've looked at, and maybe my elders said, hey, I had an elder who came to me and said, trying to learn Algonquin, she knew it, but her kids and other people trying to learn Algonquin, they didn't know the language as well, but they're still processing in their mind that way. When I say my name is of the area of John, of the area of, I'd say differently. And sometimes because you think it differently, and the way you think of it and the way you say it, it sounds like it's backwards. It feels, oh, it must be dyslexic, you got it backwards. But it's the way he was processing. He was processing as an Indigenous person, but speaking as a non-Indigenous person, and it was getting some words mixed up, and he said, oh, well, you must be disabled.
If I can add one thing to that, like it's intentional, it's like to also bring healing. There's so many people like being hurt and feeling alone, and I hope that like there's some level of healing that can come from it too, because like even like I know like culturally and even from Indigenous, like storytelling is healing and you learn, and hopefully that can bring that to.
I gave him various sharing circles in the government, but also various communities and with friends. And a lot of people come up to me and said, I'm afraid to say what it is. And then hearing people who have committed suicide because they're told they weren't good enough. You know, not just they weren't good enough, they weren't Indigenous, they weren't this. There was many things, many different, not intersectionalities, but different understandings of like what Alexa said, she couldn't be this, she couldn't be this, she couldn't be this. And I want people to say, no, you know, you're a beautiful soul, you're going to be here, you're going to have low struggles, high struggles, but the disability shouldn't limit you what you do. There should be different perspectives on how to move forward. Just like exams, you can write and you can auto text it, but you can also drum it, sing it, tapestry, paint it, beat it. Like I have a medallion about 6 inches, a friend of mine from Six Nations who made it, and 450-page text, a lot, but I have all the wisdom and knowledge in that medallion, and I wear that at my PhD dissertation, and then I presented, and the elder was like saying, wow, the examiner said, you talked about it, but you actually had it physical, I can touch it. I said, yeah, you can touch it, you can feel it.
Yep, my name is Tara. Something you just were speaking about, I think it's a nice segue into my question, and you spoke briefly, John, just now about working directly with individuals about the struggles that they may have, perhaps in the workplace, and making sure that there's a space for them, no matter the ups and downs that they're experiencing. And I'm picking up on that being here today as well. What about employers? And I ask this from the perspective of somebody who, well, from a number of perspectives, but one of which is working in the field of disability management, human resources, like some of you are familiar with as well. If looking at this book and what it has to offer, how can some of the learnings and messages and stories in this book translate to something that's meaningful from the perspective of the employers who may not necessarily have that first person experience or understanding?
It would seem that there's some work to do with the HR departments. My agency has like 250 employees, youth protection workers, case workers, all that, and maybe 6 or 7 HR people. It seems like a lot, but they're lacking in this kind of education with disability. Just an opinion. So maybe I have to be the messenger, right? To do that.
That's why I'm
In a good way.
And I think like also like area, I hope like from an employer, like understanding the different perspective and changing the narrative, because by understanding some of those stories, like hopefully this could also inform like some of their policies, the way we view things, or even the way they address or function within the workplace. But hopefully it does that, but it is a work in progress, and there's a long curve. But also, like you say, like even working with like social worker, like my background is in psychology, and oftentimes is that when you have people who doesn't understand different type of culture, their way of intervening or like approaching certain situation can be insensitive. So hopefully provide also that cultural competence.
And also in the book, there's people in the government, there's Indigenous people in the government, and some senior executives who talk about like one struggle, one person is blind, and say, hey, I'm a senior manager, and I got to identify as Indigenous and disabled, but then I got these struggles that I'm trying to do. I have to work twice as hard, or some people say they have to work harder. They can't tell people about it. So it shows that. So I wanted to get the perspective of a government employee, also that's especially so different. I really try to canvas as much as I could without going to like 1,000 chapters. But going into that, I want to see the different perspectives, and sometimes the managers, like my manager, wants to know how can they help. Sometimes they don't have the information there, and sometimes they're not giving them the right understanding, sometimes it's funding, or say, hey, this person has a disability, it says an assessment exists. I have some people saying, well, that's nice, but what do you need? What do you need to get the information? Ultimately, it's just like school or government, how you work, how the person has the knowledge and how do you transfer it. And transferring as Indigenous people, like when I did my PhD, I did mine traditionally. I had my computer, I had my notes, and then I went up, I closed it, and I went for 20 minutes. I just did it orally. And I said, because I'm not gonna sit there and read it out. I knew by then, I did 7 years of it. I knew exactly what I needed to do. And I had all the knowledge, and I just said it exactly what it was. So,
Like Elder says, like if this can be considered also a resource. Like this is the resource. You have so many out there from so many perspectives. Use it as a resource to educate and make some changes.
And I want to just follow up briefly that our agency has Indigenous and non-Indigenous, but also in the cities. Let's not forget the organizations that work in Toronto, Montreal. I do work in the homeless shelters that go around the word of indigenized because there's very few Indigenous workers, intervention workers, the Inuit and Cree especially. And if they have a disability, well, it's even more, they're more on the margin, more on the margins outside.
There's a question from online. I have a question online. So we take the question online, then we'll come back to the floor.
So online, it's an anonymous attendee, and they're asking, are your messages received well? And do you see a mind shift of people at institutions?
Okay, so I can start. So I give a lot of presentations to managers in the government about exactly this Indigenous perspective, neurodiversity, mental health. And I find it is well taken, but it depends on the approach, right? We can't come at people and start attacking them. As soon as we do that, we're going to create barriers and we're not going to get anywhere. So it really is about how we disseminate this information. And I think the way that this book has done it is a very good approach. We're bringing information and saying, we're not attacking you. You're not bad people. We just want you to see our perspective.
And I think for me, like since I've been navigating mental health like for over 20 years, and I felt like now the message is better received. So there's potential given like the climate and everything that's happening. However, like you said, it depends on how it's brought forward. But I do think that the more we tell our story, the more we share our knowledge, the more we educate, and the better we will help with like receiving it and accepting. So I think that's a step forward, and we have to continue. It's not always received or it's informative, but there's like that's a good start, and you need to continue on that.
there's need for information and knowledge. There's need for people to show what it is. We're trying to bring those two connections together, saying, here's what you can do. How can you take that information and share it so that it's those two sides that once you can connect it from different perspectives, different fields, and different areas of professionalism, then we can say, oh, look, this person, a social worker did it in the community. This friendship center did this. This person, Africa, did this. Look how we did this. And you're gonna be like, wow, look at this, because it's just like reconciliation. And Canada's not just a leader. There's different places that do it. Australia's looking at what we're doing. But then we might be looking at what South Africa has done because they had reconciliation, but we might turn around and have something else because our different indigeneity, depending on where you are on Mother Earth, it's depending, and we're all on that scale where we're trying to balance it out and share the knowledge.
Great, we're going to take two, Michelle, so we're going to, because we've got two questions on the floor here. The man in the blue and white structure, you'd like to go?
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Hamza. I'm from Iran. I'm here as a visiting scholar in the research staff. And I've been blind for more than 20 years when I was in our culture in Iran, maybe blind person, all my pressure was on my family. I mean, my family has to fix all problems, and everything that's was related to me they helped me, I have a little, big family. It's just me and 7 siblings. And, all of them helped me in this. And, maybe, social institution couldn't do anything. I was wondering if, in the Western culture, is it like that? Because as I get, one of the ladies indicated that in Western society, she couldn't find a solution for her problem, and finally the indigenous culture helped out. I didn't get it right when I wanted to be sure about the Western culture and if it fix the problem for people with disability.
I think that was my
Yeah.
segment, so Lexi, it's, and so you know who is speaking. I think fixed is the wrong term. It's not that I am cured or healed or, well, healed, yes, but fixed, no. My Indigenous teachings helped me understand who I am and be okay with that and live my life without shame of not being able to do everything that people expect me to. The Western world, I think, just has a big focus on like this sense of normal. And if you're not normal, then you need help. But in other cultures, not just, Indigenous, we've kind of seen it all across the board. People are more willing, like, yes, you mentioned you have family who's willing to help you. That's exactly what family is there, because they respect you, they love you, they see you as an equal being, and they work with you in your life to, to not only aid you, but to value the contributions that you bring. You are not a burden or a problem in their life. You bring a very important value to their life, and they see that, they respect it, and of course they will assist you in things that you feel you need more help in because you are important. And I think that side is the Western society misses. They see it as you are a burden and people need to help you, and that doesn't value people as people. That puts lives above one another.
And just to add to it, also the Western, the way of doing this is more individualistic versus community. And oftentimes, like a lot of like us even coming here, like you have your village, your community, and your family, and it's so important. It's that kind of like that's our foundation. And in the more Western sides where it's just more individual, and I feel like there's still work to do, and to kind of how do we shift, and we can learn also Indigenous perspective, how do we shift that individualistic mindset into more a community like outcome and approach, because we look at like we're human, and human is bound to belong, and we need each other. And I feel like with the Western and a lot of the system that we've in, it's like we tend to have forgotten about it, and if we are more, if we continue to kind of build more into that community, that village mindset, we can help each other so much more, and like support each other.
And it's just some of the stories that the Chapter people have, they say that their traditional approach, the non-Western ones, like in certain places of the world, they were shunned from society. Their families were there to take care of them. I know I heard some stories out in the Middle East where there's some families they have that, but from the Indigenous perspective, it's very inclusive. Like we're very inclusive from the beginning. I remember Elder Phil was telling me when I was talking to him, he said, we didn't need to have like women's rights or feminism. Indigenous women ran most of the families, but we didn't have to have this area. We already had, we were inclusive at the beginning. It's when we were colonized, we became, we were turned around, so we had to relearn those things. And now when it comes to a lot of environmental issues, ethics and research, Indigenous people are now being included, like the fires out in California and in Saskatchewan, down in California. They're finally being included. See, after 30 years, look, they're finally listening to us. So we got to include those perspectives. And I think we include the Indigenous perspective, will actually turn around, because I've seen some schools where they say, when I was working up in my mom went to Wiimatashri for training, and there a lot of people had light sensitivity. I'm like, what do you mean I have light sensitivity? So they have natural lighting. So we don't have to work like in the colonial system 14, 16 hours. You worked until the light was there, and then when the light was gone, you stopped working. You don't have to have a candle or your phone working forever. And also people saying that dyslexic, I'm like, how'd you find out you're all dyslexic? Well, because we've got strong minds, we're visual, spatial ability to think. They're listing all the positive, where the psychologist was looking at all the negative. And I said, look at a test. And I found out through a friend, the Society of Indian Psychologists, and they're saying that the tests, a lot of tests that were made, they didn't consult Native Americans. Well, how can you apply a system that was never made for a society that has different values?
We just had one more from the farm, and then we're going to have to close it down. So we're 15 minutes over. We've also got all the food from a local Indigenous catering company for all of us to stay until 6, but we do need to close on time, so we can keep the conversation going forward. So one more question over here.
Hi, my name is Brian Norton. I am the manager for the Ayuujk University Studies. Basically, the Ayuujk speak out of for students. My question is, I think it's probably a bigger question than the time frame allotted, but I want to know, we have a lot of Indigenous students who overcome a lot of hurdles just in post-secondary. And when they finally get here, they don't quite understand the work, what's being taught. And a lot of times they get anxious, frustrated, or high anxiety. And oftentimes, sometimes they may be undiagnosed with a neuro disability, but and then those who do eventually get diagnosed often face a perceived stigma around disclosing their diagnosis. My question is, how do we encourage our students to be able to take that and own that as a positive aspect, as you were saying, that we are all different and all very differently, because the education system is not here to include neurodivergent people. I often tell our students it may take years for you to go through secondary because you learn what you don't want to. It's just sometimes what you want. My second question is, I was hoping the folks would be there.
Yeah, they're going to come out in August 1st.
Okay, great.
They're in Amazon, Canada, United States, and through Rutledge. And I have a thing for you. If you get it through Rutledge, you get like a discount, 20% off.
Yeah.
Please,
you get 20% off.
Great.
On the first.
Back to the question really quickly. I think there's a message to reinforce that and repeat as necessary that you matter. You're not disabled. You have your gifts, and that just reminded me too. But there's not a lot of obstacles for teens to get in further in their education. And what comes to mind is that I found childhood trauma. Who can be expected to concentrate on anything, life skills, even basic adult ed stuff, when you have child unresolved stuff and it gets in the way. So not that it can't be overcome, but you have to go back and then move forward, resolve that, heal from that. So it's kind of like the same lines.
And I think one of the things is that we need to provide safety, like a safe space for like it's you to be themselves. Like my dad taught with like high school student, it was always a challenge, but like to have that safe space. And with everything that we're doing right now, like the more we educate, the more we tell different stories, the more we see what it looks like and everything. I think the more we can also empower those students and also empower them to understand how they are and empower them to also advocate for themselves. I think there's a collective thing to provide safety and to change the narrative of like, what is our understanding, like from being neurodivergent or disability? Like, it's different. That doesn't mean we're not able. It's difference in human capacity and how we are, and to provide them a safe space, to provide them resources, that's very much like, and it's still a big issue that's something we need to.
I think my answer is less hopeful, but these students, these Indigenous students are likely first, second, maybe third generation people in the Western society. This is not how we were taught. This is not what our instincts are. We were not meant to sit in a room for 12 hours a day and listen to someone and take notes. We were on the land. We were learning from our ancestors. This is new to us. And as much as, genetics plays a big part, past generational trauma plays a big part, our people didn't have a great introduction to schools, right? So sometimes just reminding students, yes, the challenge you are facing, the barrier you are facing is far greater than someone who's non-Indigenous would face, because this is not your environment. And it's unfortunate because there's not much we can do to change the environment. But the fact that every single day they are conquering and making it through, and like you said, regardless of how long it takes, that is a huge hurdle, and that needs to be celebrated and acknowledged.
Thank you so much to our wonderful panel. You can all give a round.